Welcome to the Helping Families Be Happy podcast, where we explore the often messy world of family, love, and relationships. I'm your host for this podcast, Adina Oberman, a mom, former preschool teacher, picture book lover, and member of the Familius marketing team. I'm also the creator of Big Books for Little Hands, a site dedicated to connecting parents and teachers with the best books for the ups and downs of life with little ones. Today, I am thrilled to welcome today's guest, Dr. Carla Marie Manly. Dr. Manly, clinical psychologist, author, and advocate, is based in Sonoma County, California. In addition to her clinical practice, focusing on relationships and personal transformation, Dr. Manly is deeply invested in her roles as podcaster and speaker. Host of the captivating podcast, Imperfect Love, Dr. Manly offers uplifting guidance on navigating the messy road of life with a refreshingly direct and honest approach, plus a dose of humor. Dr. Manly enjoys supporting others in the ever evolving journey of life. Her novel self development paradigm builds resilience, emotional intelligence, and self esteem. Highlighting the importance of loving connection, her work also focuses on helping others create deeply connected and satisfying intimate and social relationships. Working from a transformative model that honors the body, mind, spirit connection, Dr. Manly offers holistic relationship and wellness seminars around the world. An award winning author, Dr. Manly's books, The Joy of Imperfect Love, Date Smart, Joy from Fear, and Aging Joyfully highlight her empowering approach and profound expertise. Her expertise is also regularly cited in media outlets, including the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, USA Today, Forbes, Oprah, Newsweek, NBC, Huffington Post, Reader's Digest, Psychology Today, Parade, GQ, Women's Health, Architectural Digest, Men's Health, and more. This episode aligns with the Familius habits: read together and talk together. You can learn more about the Familius 10 Habits of Happy Families by going to the Habit Hub blog on familius.com. Welcome, Dr. Manly. It's an honor to talk to you and have you on the podcast as a guest.
It's a joy to be with you today, Adina. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So we are in the thick of the holiday season, and during the holidays, it's a time that's full for most people of family gatherings, gatherings at work, parties, meals with friends. And for some people, this can also mean conversations with awkward or invasive questions. So we thought you were the perfect person to ask about this. What do you recommend to people if they are, sort of anticipating these invasive or awkward questions with people during the holidays?
Such a good talking point, and thank you for allowing me to highlight the upsides to such questions, but also how to navigate them. And somebody who's listening might be saying, well, what are the upsides to these questions? Well, they indicate interest, they indicate curiosity. So that's positive. But what we want to realize, even though somebody may be really interested, may be really curious of what's going on in our personal lives, we get to have boundaries. And it is our right and I believe our responsibility to know our boundaries as best we can and then keep true to those boundaries in the different spaces of our lives. And some listeners might say, well, I hear a lot of talk about boundaries, but what are they? So let's just start with that, not assume that everyone knows what boundaries are. Boundaries are those emotional and mental barriers that we have that allow us to feel safe and secure. And barrier doesn't have to be a negative at all. We can see if we have a white picket fence in front of our house, it allows us to feel safe. It keeps our kiddos and pets safe. And it allows us to, if we want to, put that latch down and put a no trespassing sign on and say, please don't come in. Same with a lock on the door to our home. It's a barrier. Some people get a key, some don't. And that is how our boundaries can work if we're really mindful about them. We get to create that lock on our door or that fence and adjust it. We don't have to have the same boundaries with everyone. With our very best friend or a trusted intimate partner, we can have very porous boundaries that allow them into these really important parts of our lives, these sacred parts of the self. But for other people, if we don't have a strong or trusting relationship with them, we have every right to put up a nice boundary and leave it there until when and if that person gains the right to have access to that part of our lives. So that's what a boundary is. So,
That's so helpful. I think it, especially when it's the holiday season and people are, hopefully in a good mood and they're getting ready to celebrate. Sometimes it can sort of be feel counterintuitive to put a boundary up. We can feel maybe obligated to kind of lower our walls. I think that's so. It's so important that you explain, what is it and why do we need it?
and why do we need it? And thank you for bringing up the point about in a holiday gathering, we're meeting friends, we're meeting loved ones, we're meeting family that we may not have seen in a year or two, whatever it is. So we feel, oh, well, they're family. I should trust them. I should answer these questions. So notice my use of the word should. When we find ourselves or other people using the word should, that's it's a shaming message, a negative message, and it can really lead to boundary violations. So what we want to realize is that trust is earned. And if we don't feel like we can trust this person with information or that it's not appropriate, we have every right to say something like this. Thank you for your interest in my marriage plans, but I'm not discussing that now. Or thank you for your interest in my sexual orientation. That's really something I keep to myself. Thank you for your interest in my political views. I appreciate your curiosity. I have a hard stop at talking about politics. I don't do it. Well, what about then? Let's talk about your work. When are you getting your next raise? Well, thank you for your interest in my financial matters. I really keep that in, a very sacred part of my life. I don't discuss that. Well, okay, well then when are you giving me grandkids? Oh, when's the baby coming? Oh, thank you so much for your information in my interest or lack thereof in procreating. And that's not on the table. However, let's talk about you. Let's talk about what your travel plans are for the coming year. Let's talk about your bucket list. Let's talk about what you do in your spare time. How's your garden? And so what we can do is even practice some of this. If this feels awkward, listeners, it's okay. Practice in the mirror. Practice with your friend. Practice with your romantic partner. Practice and get used to. You likely know the people, or at least know the type of people you're going to be meeting during the holidays. So work on some scripts so that you can feel really strong. And even though it may feel uncomfortable and you may get pushback, it's okay. You have the right. If somebody keeps invading, I'm a fan in general of the 3 strikes you're out approach. And what I mean by that is often as we learn boundaries and decide that we want to go into the holidays or family gatherings and not feel assaulted anymore. So we might be working with a therapist, we might be reading a self-help book, we might be listening to YouTube's podcasts. And then as we go into the family gathering, we're all ready to do it differently because we've listened and we've learned. But the other people, mom, grandma, aunts, uncle, friends, they don't realize we've been working on our boundaries behind the scenes. So they may be used to plying us with questions, putting a lot of pressure, having us cry and stomp out in tears, whatever it is, right? But as we learn to set our boundaries, if it feels right to you, it's okay to say, you know, I don't talk about that, or that's not on the table, and the person might try again. Then we can repeat it the second time, that's really off the table. And if they do it again, that's the third time, that's the strike you're out. We get to say, you know what, I'm going to take a time out. I'm going to go and talk over to so and so, or I'm going to go for a walk around the block. I hope you understand that this is a boundary for me, and I truly mean it when I say I don't want to talk about it. Does that make sense, Adina?
It makes so much sense. And as we're discussing this, I'm really just thinking about my own experiences, and um, it feels like a good reminder that establishing your boundaries is a form of self-care, right? Because you are saying, this is what I can handle, these are my limits, and this is where I stop and I protect myself, whether it's emotionally, spiritually, whether it's physically trying to stay away from someone who maybe has already has already struck out previously, um, because we all deserve to, as you say, not be harassed or, as you said, assaulted at family gatherings. We all deserve to say, this is what I'm okay with, and this is not okay. Um, for me, this sort of became more tangible as I became a mom and started thinking about how I want to teach my own children about where their boundaries are. And for us, that looks like when we see family, we have them ask, or we ask, can I give you a hug before we go in for the hug? Even my nieces and nephews that always say yes, um, we're trying to set that boundary that that physical interaction is something that you need permission for. And so if our children and our loved ones are deserving of that boundary and that respect, then so are we. um, and so I think you're just reminding me of how important all of these things are for ourself, and how they really just equal self-love.
Absolutely. And I talk about this a lot in my fourth book, The Joy of Imperfect Love, how when we are getting to know the self, and we're all always evolving, that sometimes people will see a shift in us as we get stronger, as we're reprogramming our brain, from being a doormat into being an individual or whatever it might be. And as we work on that, we will evolve. And here's another one of the beautiful upsides. You're talking about your kiddos and wanting them to feel safe and to have boundaries. Notice how, and listeners, I hope you can envision this as you walk into the family gathering, and maybe you're used to being people's pincushion or the target of everybody's questions. As you get really strong and stay present and there with grace and really solid boundaries, you become a role model by default. Not just for the kiddos in the room, you become a role model for the adults in the room. And that is so important. And how does this connect with self-love? The more we take care of the self in really mindful, thoughtful ways, the more we learn, oh, this is what it likes to feels like to be strong, to be centered, to be grounded. Oh, I love this. I moved through that discomfort. I moved through the fear of holding my boundaries. I can do this. And then that creates more self-esteem, more confidence, and more self-love, because we're doing an action that honors the self. And the last piece I do want to bring up is that so often, not always, but often in holiday situations, people have a little bit of something on board. They have some alcohol on board. They've had, a hot toddy or an eggnog or a few too many beers or glasses of wine. And we want to realize, I'm not, I choose not to drink alcohol. I don't like alcohol and such things. So for me, it's really easy. But I notice that in other people, when they have a little bit something on board, they can be quite invasive, quite bullyish, quite thinking that they're acting in fun, and the other person who's the target is not having any fun. And that's when it is really a good time to know that trying to reason with someone when there's alcohol or something on board, you can't reason with anyone if their prefrontal cortex is not engaged. So remember, those are some really good times just to say, can't have this conversation, or I really don't want to have this conversation. I'm going to go and wash dishes, or whatever you want to do. It's okay.
Yes, absolutely. I think it sort of goes back to that point of it's okay for you to say, this is what works for me, this is what doesn't work for me, and you don't get to decide where that boundary is. Um, yes, and I think that the more you do it, the more it becomes habit. And as you said, modeling for adults and for children about how you should be treated and how they should be treated. So I think those are all such great points. I have to ask, do you think that these same methods and boundary setting phrases would work for when people might want to ask you questions about politics, and maybe you don't want to engage in a discussion about that in that moment, or do you have different advice?
It's pretty much the same, Adina, that when we simply say, you know, I don't talk religion at social gatherings. I don't talk politics at social gatherings. I it doesn't feel good to me. And if you get pressured, I gave away my secret. If I'm at a gathering where people come at me too much because I'm an introvert, I will truly take off for the kitchen and help wash dishes. If it's in my own home, because I find it soothing, I will find a broom and sweep the floor because it's my way of creating. We're used to the idea of timeout in negative ways. I really love the timeout idea as in putting yourself in a situation where you get some time out to recenter, recalibrate. So no matter what's on the table, politics, whatever it might be, it's really okay. If you're feeling too pressured, don't have to engage. You get to say, hey, I'm going to go take a time out.
That's such great advice. And I think everyone, whether they're the host or a guest, appreciates having a hand. And such a
Oh,
such a
yes.
great way to make a graceful exit and still be welcome back for the next gathering. As we
Absolutely.
begin to wind down, I want to make sure that our listeners can find you online. So can you remind us where they can get in touch with you and get your books and listen to your podcast?
Well, my books are available at Familius, and they're on Amazon. They're in bookstores. I have four, so you can see them also on my website. And my website is drcarlamanly.com. That's drcarlamanly.com. And you can find me in all the usual places, Dr. Carla Marie Manly. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok for now, all those places. I'm there.
Thank you so much for being with us today, Dr. Manley.
Thank you.
As we conclude today's podcast, I'd like to thank Familius for their support in bringing the podcast to your ears and your heart. We'd be thrilled if you subscribed to the podcast and left us a review. And when you're ready for that next amazing book adventure, we'd be honored if you choose a book from Familius. One step at a time, we can make the world a happier place.